Gerald, this is an exhibition of 8 years' work. Some of it's paintings, some of it's graphics, some of it is in the form of silkscreen prints, and altogether you've subtitled it Magpie. Can you tell us something about that title?
Well, it has to do with the fact that I worked for about 7 years altogether on magazines, and that I just pick stuff out at random. So Magpie is really split into two, being mag and pie, making a pie of the bits and pieces that I've picked up from magazines. It ties together with stained glass as well. I mean, you've got to bring that in at some point.
You were originally trained at the Royal College as a stained glass,
In the stained glass
designer.
Yeah.
And in that time, since you've been living in Suffolk, in the country, you've abandoned painting, or you've done much less painting than the early work here, which is largely painting.
Well, it's really a matter of moving into a smaller cottage, so the work's got smaller. That's all that amounts to, really. It's just a matter of physical space. Big ones, which come to in a minute, I suppose, were done in a bigger cottage than the smaller ones, which were done in a smaller cottage. It's as simple as that.
Do you ever have a sort of yearning to go back to painting?
Oh yes, if I got the space, I'd do it.
You would?
Yeah. It's just the tops of the paintings hit the ceiling all the time and keep falling over, and the easel won't go up all the way. It's just a matter of physical difficulties.
The painting behind you, which you say is the earliest piece here, is quite small.
Yeah, in fact, that was done in the bigger cottage. From, I don't know, it's a book of Russian paintings. I think it's a propaganda piece, but what it's about, I don't know, because the caption was in Russian, the whole book was in Russian, but it just caught my fancy in a nice sort of horror film way. Somebody picking somebody's brains out. It might be anti-Semitic, I'm not sure, and that I wouldn't like to push that at all. You know, that's by the by. Just a nice horror painting.
And these larger ones are not by any means horror paintings, are they?
Not really, but well, you know, I've got this kink about horror films anyway, so it's always in the back of my mind when things like brash colour, and this one is about Ireland. Speaks for itself, I hope. I did it way back in 67 and 68, I think it's looked good. And Bernadette was defeated in the last general election, so I put the black ribbon on the day after she was defeated. It's a funny painting because it had this row of faces all the way round, and a friend of mine told me it looked too much like Sunday Times colour supplement, so I painted out most of the face and just went to town on it. But it's got a message of hope. These two people down this corner have escaped it all that it's about. So that's really, although they seem like pessimistic pictures, there's an optimistic little bit in each one. All this sort of consumer stuff, the lighters and bursting into fire, come in lots of other pictures. They're just taken from consumer magazines. That's the way it goes. This was sort of representative of Bernadette. I don't really think she sprayed fire on the situation, but it'll do. And the next one? Return of Dracula. Count Dracula is direct reference to horror films, really, and there's another one coming later, a sort of redrawing of the whole thing. In this little tiny piece here was going to be the words "Back from the hell that spawned them" or something like that, a really corny horror film subtitle or something like this. But of course it ties up with capitalism and it's political, like all the pictures are. And if you like, the downtrodden workers, and it sounds awful, but it's not as bald as that, as you can see in the picture. And the blood-sucking bit, and the apparently peaceful landscape going on. All the awful things are happening. A great monster black guy who's got Norman, gosh, I've forgotten his name, probably as well I don't mention it. He's a playwright. Norman, he's tied up with Joan Lippwood. Anyway, his eyes, which struck me as particularly horrific, and his lips as well. Not that that has very much to do with the picture, I suppose. Anyway, we'll come to the other one later on. The redrawing of the whole thing. How it's been a while we drew it. This one is called Consumer Revolution, and it has to do with what the bottom part of the Bernadette picture had about it, that there's all the consumer durables all fighting it out amongst themselves for the attention you actually consume. While in the sky above floats a nice black coon figure. Really don't know what it's got to do with it. It's very hard to explain all in one go. There's a lot in them. I could go on talking about it for hours. And maybe it'd be best to pick out one. Let's talk about one. A great thing. Is the watershed painting, because previous to doing this one, I was painting in this way. Very decorative, very flat, areas of flat colour. And they didn't have any political content of any kind. But this one is about, it's called The Sheriff and the Bedbug. And in that little pocket is a news clipping from the Times dated June 7th, 1966, which says, the United States scientists are developing a new weapon for use against the Viet Cong in Vietnam, screaming bedbugs. The bedbugs will not bite, but sniff out the gorillas like bloodhounds. Military scientists are working on ways to amplify the bedbug's cry when it senses it from distances up to 200 yards, so that it becomes audible to human ears. When this is achieved, scout parties preceding jungle patrols could carry the bugs to give warning of hidden gorillas from loitering. And this little machine in here is the screaming bedbug. Well, the other part of the painting at the top is concerned with what was going on in America at the same time in 67. Sheriff Rainey should by now be famous or infamous. He was a real bastard, and still is a real bastard, this one on earth. And one day I'll paint a really big picture about him and really nail him down. But that part of the painting is America, the other part is Vietnam. The birds just indicate the distance between the States and Vietnam, with various bits and pieces from American sort of mythology, the cowboy figure and all the hero soldiers, the motorbike cop, and right in the middle, good old Sheriff Rainey, who had my blood if he ever comes over here, I suppose. The gunfighter of Western fame, and all the little bits about Vietnam. This bit here, and right down the bottom, that bit there. It's just that exactly the same thing is going on in the States. This picture is where I sort of came back after the Bernadette picture, deciding to draw everything instead of use collage. Because I can do it as well as collage. I picked Fatima completely meaningless. Fatima Noble is a Jerry Cornelius story. You just have to look up Jerry Cornelius if you want to know about him. He's a character, a science fiction character anybody can use. So the story is about him, but it brings in all my ideas as well. My ideas about all sorts of things. It's a very muddled picture in a way. So if you come down to this one first, you'll see that I, who is I, Gerald Nason, propose myself for the assistance committee, and they are Mad Hatter, Charlie Chaplin, Keir Hardy, Lenin, Kitchener, Stretchy, Snoopy, an unknown capitalist from a cartoon, Dick Tracy, Buddy Holly, a P.G. Woodhouse character, and Captain America. Which gives you some idea, or perhaps not, what the whole series is about. This is the first page of a comic. I don't know how big, because I haven't done it all yet. It's a story of which I've done the beginning and the end, but not the middle. This one over this side's the cover. That one is the title page. The next one is an intermediate page. And the next one's another intermediate page. And the final one is this one, the last page, when the story comes to an end. There's a blade of glory one way or another. In between, there's a whole story yet to be written, using all the political ideas, all these characters pop up again. They just play a part of the story like a newspaper. One picks up a newspaper, there's anything in it all attached, completely meaningless, related, one to another, each piece. But this is the way it all works, as far as I can see. No, not as far as I can see. It just does, that's how it seems.
Gerald, in all this that you've been talking about, at the same time as the political significance that it has for you, and the way in which you throw the symbols of one belief, one culture against another, your own work has a very definite, very English, dare I say, aesthetic, and this is very consistent, running right through from the early paintings through to this work, which is much more recent. It's identifiably graphic. It's identifiably the putting together of small, very closely observed episodes together with the use of quite bright colouring. I mean, you obviously enjoy bright colours, and yet to a lot of people these are understood as themselves being a symptom of the sort of the swinging 60s and enjoyment of bright things and consumer society. A lot of these drawings that you're in front of now use bright coloured pentel. I know this is because of the process of a sketch for a silk screen. But how do you feel about this? Do you feel that your work is at the same time very much an Englishman living in the country, using pentels or whatever, looking at Vietnam or the Americans or comics or movies from a distance?
Yeah, perhaps so. All that I get in is second-hand stuff in a way. I don't really see how you mean definitely English. Where does that come in? How does that strike?
I think it's something to do with the use of very small cartoon elements and an obvious liking for typography, for instance, obvious liking for little vignettes which are then put together one to the next to the next to the next, which is quite a romantic sort of thing to do.
I have a personal like of boxes within boxes within boxes, but I don't really see that. Perhaps it is an English thing, is it?
Do you think it's something to do with having worked on magazines a lot?
Yes, I suppose so. I mean, the bright colours are easily explainable. They're just the stained glass influence. I got a taste for colours with light coming through them, and black line to separate those bright colours, which is carried over. I picked up 8 or 9 years after I laid down my last piece of stained glass. That's very simple. And the magazine, I've always been in love with magazines of one kind or another, right back to when I was a kid, I suppose. And comics, I don't have the sort of manic craze that exists for comics now, but
these small drawings are in the corner, for instance, over here.
Yes.
They're much quieter. They crop up again on your leaflet, the one underneath. Can you say something about those?
Just a reflection of me getting older, I suppose.
They're quite recent.
This, in fact, is almost the most recent one, only 4 weeks ago finished. Yes, it is a quiet picture, but the one below is pretty nasty, pretty violent still, I think. It's the shock of seeing what goes on, not being able to quite identify where it goes on, that it actually does go on. I've only ever been one punch up in my life, and I went straight out, one punch, and that was it. So it's all very strange to me, particularly living in the country. It's even more foreign, but I know it goes on. It's about Mick Jagger's thing about street fighting man. It's a very romantic thing. What the Communist Party condemns as romantic thinking. It was done the year there was street fighting in Czechoslovakia, in Paris, in Germany, in this country, in the States, and that's really what it amounts to. It's a romantic painting, okay. The pigs are outside, the rest of us are trapped inside this little frame, and we are trapped, we've got to get out of there. And one day, strange as it may seem, we've got to do something more about it than just talk about it, or paint about it, or collage about it, or draw about it. And that's the worrying day. It's not very far ahead, I think. October the 10th, maybe, 1974. When the pigs won't look like Americans anymore. They will look like straightforward English cops, with their nice helmets on and their friendly pink faces. It'll even carry to the country, which is something I'm not looking forward to, because I don't know what I'll do. I won't be able to paint about it anymore. I'll have to do something about it. This one, when the middle class at play, it's called Heroes at Play actually. It is the middle class at play. All the dirty tricks that you're pushing each other around, hitting each other, all the rest of it. It's a painterly collage. There is such a thing with colours used to indicate movement, which is something I've not done before. But I'm told by some people that it works better than a lot of other pictures. It condenses the movement and the political ideas as well, I think, I hope. It's cut from magazines for middle class buyers and Empire stores, I think. And a nice green underpants and nice clean vests all fighting it out together. And when it comes to it, there'll be the pigs, and we'll be the rest trapped in the little square that I talked about in the last picture. The ball at the top is sort of irrelevant to the action, as you can see, but you have to put it there to suggest a game. I did a lot of lead-up sort of sketch collages for this one. I suppose I regard this as a really finished thing. I call the others notes. This one does work better as a more, I think. Again. Perhaps a question or two about it might be in order.
Well, it looks as if there's a lot more going on than you've even just said there. I mean, it's got a very strange sort of symbolism. It's almost the sort of nice chap in period as well as the nice chap of today. For instance, the colours you've chosen have got a sort of very pre-selected quality. And in fact, it's a much narrower range of colours than you've used on other works.
Well, to some extent,
there's a lot of sort of taste which you're probably sending up at the same time going on.
Yeah, well, to a large extent, I was influenced by the colours used in the catalogue. There's sort of fairly subtle browns and blues. So I used other blues and reds, which weren't used in the original, to give that movement feeling. And sure, there is more going on than I say there is. There always is, but that's it's the difference between talking about a picture or listening to the artist talking about a picture and looking at it. There's always so much more one hopes in the picture itself, which you might be able to bring out by questions. I don't know.
How do you feel, about the whole business of putting things in exhibitions? Some of these paintings have been very deliberately framed, such as this one we've just been talking about. Again, there's the whole ritual of the exhibition and the fact that the ritual of even lining the things up, the ritual of putting them in a kind of date order, and in a sense one's commenting on oneself in a very traditional way.
I don't really see how you can escape from the date where it's convenient. That's all really one can say about it. If somebody wants to walk around with a catalogue in their hand and say this one's 66, this one's 67, you can see some kind of progression, but does it really matter? 50 years in, see if they're looked at or if they're rotted away or been thrown away or whatever. Will it mean very much that one came before the other?
But as a magnetite, Gerald, you've spent a lot of time not only working on other people's magazines, but you created a magazine of your own some years ago called Number. And I think that as a result of the leaflet for this exhibition, you're very tempted to start another one. I would have thought that for your ideas and to make some of the background political statements that you have to and want to, that this might be a very good way of working.
Sure.
That in a way the business of making finished artworks in frames to a certain size isn't enough, and that perhaps in essence you are also a sort of pamphleteer. In the tradition of the political pamphleteer.
Absolutely. It's the ideal way. If there was a cheaper way of reproducing things almost immediately in full colour, getting them out into the street, and there was a writer who wrote in the same way that I paint, collage, draw, then it would be ideal. One puts them in frames and shows them in exhibitions because this is the way the art world works, although the art world hasn't taken a great deal of notice of these particular pictures, neither in the country nor in the town.
Do you feel alienated from the art world, just as in a sense you feel alienated from good old British society? Do you feel that it's perhaps from not only a political point of view, but from the traditional point of view of the illustrator, that you're outside the normal streams of the art world anyhow?
Yeah, it isn't a matter of me thinking I'm outside the normal streams of art as is accepted. I bloody well am. That's made quite obvious to me by so many people. They take one look and, oh, it's political, that's it. Forget it. But this particular picture has more to do with art, I suppose, than any of the others. Just in the way it's constructed, very deliberately, worked over for a very long while, not put together in quite the same way that one would put a magazine together, thought about a lot. Maybe it's the most successful picture.
I think it is one of the most successful ones because it's got this incredible...
Why hasn't it sold?
Because it's got a sort of very... To me, the thing that appeals is its consistency, strangely enough, that it's a very exciting thing. It's got a lot of movement in it, and yet at the same time it's got this control. It's got a very consistent style running right across the work. Now, maybe that's not really a criticism of collage, which I personally like very much. I think some of these collages are themselves very exciting, but it's an excitement that's made up of collecting together different pieces of very different origin. Whereas this is a sort of, this is very distilled. It's kind of pushing things into a visual similarity of style, and yet actually then what's going on inside the thing has the dynamic, which is almost the reverse, you know?
It's not worrying because when one gets sort of too tight about a thing, concentrate on that, perhaps movement, just indicated by those red and blue pieces, it all gets a bit academic, and the emotion sort of drains out of it. And I believe in there being quite a lot of emotion in pictures. Although I'm a great sort of fanatic of technical